tariffs against China add up to 145%.
Work with the manufacturers identified in the online videos, and we urge consumers to be aware of potentially counterfeit products and misinformation.
Turns out your quote-unquote made in Italy luxury handbag might have more ties to Chinese factories than to Tuscany.
Imagine proudly carrying what you believed was the pinnacle of luxury, a $38,000 handbag that symbolizes status, taste, and timeless design, only to discover it may not be what it seems. We're not talking about replicas or knockoffs sold in hidden marketplaces. This controversy goes far deeper. It centers around Hermès, the legendary French fashion house valued at over $200 billion, now facing intense scrutiny over accusations that threaten to shatter the very foundation of its reputation. This isn't just about leather and logos, it's about allegations of misrepresentation, hidden manufacturing practices, and a lawsuit spearheaded by someone with a deeply personal connection to the brand. What's unfolding isn't the typical tabloid drama. At the core of this story is Lou Birkin, daughter of the late Jane Birkin, the very woman after whom the iconic Birkin bag is named. Lou's legal actions and public stance have thrown a spotlight on years of secrecy and quiet control. Her involvement is far more than symbolic. It suggests that the legacy of the Birkin name may have been exploited without proper credit or compensation. And she's not approaching this quietly. Her legal team is revealing claims that Hermès has long maintained a public image of handmade perfection in French ateliers, while quietly outsourcing production overseas, all while tightly guarding its brand narrative. The backlash isn't just legal, it's cultural. Leaked documents, insider testimonies, and viral videos are pulling back the curtain on practices that contradict the brand's carefully curated image. Consumers are asking tough questions. Who really made these bags? Where were they stitched? And was the story they were sold, the tale of exclusivity, legacy, and craftsmanship, just a marketing fantasy? The allegations are sparking heated debate in luxury fashion circles, forums, and even among longtime collectors who now find themselves wondering whether they were misled. As these revelations continue to unfold, one thing is becoming increasingly clear. The name Birkin may never carry the same weight again. Whether you're a fashion lover, an industry insider, or simply someone curious about how power and prestige are manufactured, this story has something for you. Because once you understand what's allegedly been happening behind the scenes, it's nearly impossible to view that iconic handbag the same way ever again. Lou Birkin didn't choose diplomacy, and she certainly didn't opt for quiet negotiations. She didn't draft a gentle email, request a formal meeting, or attempt backdoor conversations with Hermès executives. Instead, she took the most direct and disruptive route possible. She delivered a blunt one-page legal document that sent immediate shockwaves through the heart of the luxury giant's operations. The message was unmistakably clear and impossible to misinterpret. Cease all Birkin bag production, effective immediately. That simple command reportedly brought entire assembly lines to a standstill. In high-security factories that normally operate in silence and secrecy, workers downed tools mid-stitch as internal panic spread like wildfire across the company. But Lou's move wasn't just about halting handbag production. It was a bold strike aimed at correcting a legacy she believes was built on exploitation. For more than 3 decades, her mother, the late Jane Birkin, had been immortalized not as a person, but as a luxury symbol. Her name became synonymous with prestige, wealth, and exclusivity. Hermès used that name, her identity, to market one of the most sought-after fashion items in the world. And yet, despite the billions in revenue that flowed in over the years, Jane Birkin reportedly never received a single royalty. No profit sharing. No licensing deal. Not even formal acknowledgement beyond the bag's title. Just glossy marketing and orange boxes. A global brand identity spun from someone else's story. Lou's legal action wasn't driven only by grief or sentiment. It was a direct demand for justice. She was reclaiming her mother's narrative from a corporation that had long profited off it without proper compensation or consent. And while that alone would have made headlines, the timing of her lawsuit couldn't have been more explosive. Just as Hermès executives scrambled to manage the fallout in Parisian boardrooms, an even bigger threat was brewing on the other side of the world. Unbeknownst to them, a factory worker thousands of miles away was preparing to release footage that would challenge Hermès' most sacred promise: that every Birkin bag was lovingly handcrafted in France by elite artisans. That viral moment would soon break the internet, and drag Hermès into a public relations crisis like it had never seen before. But in hindsight, Lou Birkin's legal strike was the first domino. It wasn't just about one woman protecting her mother's name. It was about exposing a luxury empire built on illusion. And as the layers started peeling away, the world would begin to see that behind the elegance and exclusivity lay a much more complicated truth. Then came the viral clip that appended everything. The calm, quietly devastating footage that turned Hermès' polished image upside down. There were no flashy transitions, no suspenseful soundtrack, and no dramatic reveals. Just a steady, composed voice walking viewers through the economics of a single Birkin bag. Item by item, the narrator broke it down with surgical precision. $450 for genuine Italian leather, $25 for high-quality thread sourced from France, and $10 for labor completed in a Chinese factory. That brought the total manufacturing cost to roughly $1,400. Compare that to the retail price of $38,000, and the gap was staggering. But it wasn't the math alone that made viewers stop scrolling. It was what the math represented. People weren't just reacting to inflated prices. They were realizing that the value of a Birkin wasn't in the materials or even the craftsmanship. It was in the story Hermès had told them. A story of heritage, exclusivity, and timeless French artistry. And now, that narrative was unraveling in real time. Comment sections exploded with disbelief, sarcasm, and outrage. One viewer nailed the sentiment in a single line. This isn't about a handbag, it's about selling a myth. What made things worse for Hermès was that this wasn't a case of counterfeit goods or unauthorized replicas. Experts quickly reviewed the video and verified its contents. Every stitch, serial code, and signature detail lined up. This wasn't an imitation, it was an actual Birkin bag, constructed far from the cobblestone streets of Paris in a place the company had never admitted using. It was a quiet factory overseas. Precisely the kind of facility Hermès marketing had long claimed didn't exist in their supply chain. And then came the final blow. The footage wasn't just something the internet stumbled upon. It was handed directly to Lou Birkin's legal team, and they wasted no time making it part of their case. They argued that this video didn't just show misleading business practices. It exposed what they called heritage fraud. The idea that Hermès had built its billion-dollar brand on the illusion of tradition and authenticity, while quietly cutting costs behind the scenes. Overnight, the phrase "made in France" went from a point of pride to a punchline. Luxury customers who once flaunted their Birkins as symbols of sophistication were now questioning whether they'd simply bought into clever branding. The backlash was swift, and the damage to Hermès' image was deeper than anyone anticipated. Because when the story behind a $38,000 bag starts to fall apart, so does the illusion that made people believe it was worth that price in the first place. The craftsmen and women who had long been the proud, skilled faces representing Hermès in their glossy advertising campaigns were growing restless, and they began to speak out in ways the company never anticipated. These Parisian artisans, once seen as the heart and soul behind every Birkin bag, started quietly sharing messages behind closed doors. These weren't just vague complaints or whispers of discontent. No, they included concrete evidence showing that many of the highly coveted Birkins were actually being assembled far from the elegant workshops of Paris, in factories located in places like Vietnam, China, and Romania. One particularly bold employee even went so far as to threaten a live stream, vowing to expose the reality behind the polished brand image. Let the world finally see where your so-called French masterpiece is really being crafted, they declared. This kind of insider whistleblowing sent shockwaves through Hermès leadership. Suddenly, panic swept across the company's headquarters. Security measures were ramped up dramatically, with guards stationed around key workshops and production sites. Phones and other devices were confiscated on the spot, all in an attempt to prevent any further leaks from spilling out to the public. The company was desperate to contain the fallout, trying to keep the carefully constructed illusion intact. Despite their efforts, the damage had already been done, and it was significant. The tightly held myth of exclusivity and unparalleled French craftsmanship that Hermès had painstakingly built over decades started to crumble in a matter of weeks. The carefully cultivated image of a luxury bag handcrafted by master artisans in Paris began to seem as fragile and fake as a poorly made counterfeit zipper falling apart at the seams. With every leaked message and every threatened exposure, the glamorous veil lifted, revealing a reality far less enchanting, and far more troubling, for the world's most iconic handbag brand. Next came an unexpected wave of rejection from the very tastemakers who had helped fuel the Birkin's legendary status. Fashion insiders and stylists, often in constant communication through group chats and private messages, suddenly started spreading urgent advice: drop the Birkins immediately. What had once been a coveted symbol of ultimate luxury became a liability overnight. High-profile celebrities who had been seen proudly carrying their Birkins began to make swift changes. The Kardashians, longtime Birkin enthusiasts, were among the first to quietly switch out their prized bags, replacing them with more safe and scandal-free brands like Goyard. This shift wasn't subtle, it was a bold statement. Meanwhile, online resale platforms, which had been thriving on Birkin demand and skyrocketing prices, faced chaos. Sellers rushed to offload their bags in droves, some slashing prices by as much as 50% or more, desperate to distance themselves from the growing controversy. The sudden flood of listings overwhelmed these apps, causing temporary crashes and glitches as the market struggled to keep up with the rapid change. Even music superstar Drake, who famously referenced Birkins in his lyrics and once showcased an enviable collection of the bags, made a quiet exit from the scene. Reports suggest he discreetly gifted his entire collection to someone else, removing himself from the spotlight tied to the brand. The takeaway from all this was unmistakable. The luxury giant Hermès was facing a severe image crisis, and no one wanted to be connected to a product now tainted by scandal. The Birkin, once the symbol of untouchable exclusivity and glamour for over 4 decades, suddenly found its iconic reputation unraveling. The hype train that had carried it to legendary status had come to an abrupt and dramatic halt. Lawsuits exploded. Antitrust cases accused Hermès of extorting customers. Spend $50,000 on scarves, then you can buy a Birkin. Suppliers demanded cash up front. Analysts whispered, bankruptcy. And Lou? She didn't stop at lawsuits. She demanded an asset freeze, locking Hermès accounts, seizing warehouses, and choking their cash flow. The empire built on scarcity was now begging for mercy. So, was the Birkin ever really worth $38,000? Or was it just a leather bag wrapped in a fairy tale? Hermès' downfall isn't just about lawsuits, it's about greed devouring legacy. And here's the twist. You hold the power now. Every time you skip the logo and demand transparency, you're rewriting the rules. So what's next? Is Louis Vuitton sweating? Is Chanel shaking? Comment below. And if you're ready to see more luxury myths exposed, smash like and share this with someone who thinks price tags equal prestige. See you in the next one.